Now we get to the third topic, the methods. As I told you in the outline, we have 4 methods. One is the tripod method, the monopod method, handheld, and the gimbal method. We'll take a quick look at all of them, but we will still focus on the tripod and take a closer look at it because this method is also the cleanest for the simple reason that we can play with the exposure time of the tripod and thus get motion blur in the picture. In addition, the tripod method also offers you the possibility to adjust the fixed point more easily using the gear head I showed you. We'll definitely show you again how it all works. At the end, we also hope to show you the advantages and disadvantages of the other methods. Best method, the tripod method. So, when we arrive at the location where we want to shoot, we first try to get a feeling for the perspective. We look around a bit and just try to get a nice perspective. When we have done that, we try to generate a nice tracking shot from this perspective and walk these paths once to get the feeling. Try to avoid sources of error. It's important that we stay at the same level, that we try to be careful not to go over edges or curves that are unnecessary. Trees or lanterns are elements that are strongly disturbing when they pass through the picture. These can, of course, affect our tracking in the end. Therefore, it's very important to do the tracking shot once before actually filming. Also, try to orientate yourself on natural markings, for example on stones or slabs, maybe even on railings. I always try to take this into account when I do my tracking shots because we can measure the range exactly and estimate the exact distance. It's also important that every picture is shot at the same distance, so that we get a very smooth movement there. If we don't have that, we simply work with our rope or with the chalk we have and then set markers. When we are ready to start our tracking shot, we set up the tripod and the camera and go to the starting point. There, we use the interval meter and its interval between the pictures and try to check all the camera settings again to see if they are set up the right way. A very important issue is the fixed point. We should look for a fixed point on the object we're photographing, which needs to be always visible during the entire duration. We should definitely pay attention to this and ensure its visibility so that we can use this point in post-production. Before we start now, another important tip about the 6 axes. As already mentioned, pay attention to the 3 position axes and the 3 rotation axes. We try to control the position axes with our markings and the rotation axes with our geared head. Here it's really important to work concentrated to search for and aim at the fixed point. We start our hyperlapse and our interval meter and try to work through the images in a concentrated way. This is important. Try to adjust the camera so that you are not working in silent mode. A certain feedback from the camera is definitely helpful to get a certain sense of rhythm for the hyperlapse. That always helps me a lot. As already mentioned, as a little tip, use longer intervals at the beginning. Try to work concentrated and take an interval that doesn't put you in a stressful situation. The problem with hyperlapse is that in order to achieve the quality we want, every frame has to be perfect. That means we can't afford to make a mistake. Any mistake will cause the image to start jerking, or maybe the hyperlapse is not useful at all. We've now completed the hyperlapse and can watch the shot on the preview monitor. Of course, this gives us a great feeling for the tracking shot, and we can decide if we have to do the shot again or if we have to look for another position to maybe enhance the shot with certain objects in the picture or to support it with certain movements in the camera. Something that I've already mentioned several times, but which is very important in any case. Try to get the 6 axes under control. That means try to estimate the position correctly and exactly, and of course also the rotation. Very important point. Always remember it and work concentrated. Of course, there are other methods as mentioned before. We've done the same thing with the handheld. It's the same method, A big advantage of this method is that we can work very fast. We don't have any equipment that we have to move, and therefore we are naturally much more flexible. A disadvantage, we get weak arms when we have a longer hyperlapse. You can try and hold your camera up for 10 to 15 minutes. You'll notice that you can't work as precisely and targeted. That means there is more jerkiness in our hyperlapse. It just gets harder and harder to target the fixed point. The third option is the monopod. I have to say, in the end, this is a very, very good alternative to the tripod because we have the advantage to work fast and clean, and we have the possibility to focus on the fixed points very well with the monopod. This is really a big advantage which we don't really have with the handheld. Another disadvantage of this version is, of course, that we have to work with equipment and that small mistakes in the roll axis creep in very quickly. That means we don't have that much control over this important axle. The fourth variant is the gimbal. It's basically the same principle, but now we make a video of this and run the same ride. I must admit that the gimbal hyperlapse is not ideal for the tracking shot we chose there. I wanted to show you the same shot anyway, but I have to admit that the gimbal variant works much better with smaller movements. As you can see, the long tracking shot is not very suitable for the gimbal. I'd rather fall back on simple camera movements. You can also work with the lock mode of the gimbal variant, which of course blocks the axes and therefore clean shots are possible. Advantage of this method, it's the fastest and you can get very smooth tracking shots. Disadvantage, we don't have such a big time shift in our time-lapse shots and therefore no big cloud movement, which is the magic of a hyperlapse. In addition, it's also difficult to keep the fixed point. So, now I would like to compare all methods again. As already mentioned, the tripod version is the best one. It's the cleanest way to work because we can of course target the fixed point much better and we have much more control over the roll axis. The advantage of the other methods is of course the equipment. We don't have such a heavy load, but again the source of error increases. Of course, I can't tell you which method you should choose. I'm a big friend of the tripod version, but I also see the monopod version as an alternative. You have to see for yourself which method is best suited for your shot. If you're traveling with very small tools, very little equipment, then you can also try a handheld version. But I'd always recommend the monopod version as the happy medium if you don't want to do it with the tripod. Now you know all the methods, and now we go to post-production.